Cockpit orientation video here. I'll go through the instruments and some of the basic controls from the front cockpit. Have your oil temperature here, oil pressure. Here's your G meter. It will show the highest level G pulled for the day, both positive and negative, and you can reset it by pushing the button there. Airspeed indicator in miles per hour. Most of the over-the-top, loops and like Immelmans and such, those are done around 145, and it's miles per hour versus knots, but just that's more of an academic discussion. But you'll be somewhere between 140 and 145 for most of the over-the-top maneuvers. When you come into land, typically airspeed around 80, and sometimes the instructor in the back cannot see the airspeed indicator. So if you see it trending well below 80, you might want to mention something to them in case they can't see it. Altimeter, have fuel pressure over here, manifold pressure, amps, RPMs. When we're flying, we will reduce the RPMs from its maximum, which is up around 26 to 27. You'll reduce that with the prop control here. You'll rotate it just slightly aft like this, and you get the RPMs down to 2,500. Turn slip indicator, VVI. Radio control, pretty much all you need to do with the radio control, as long as you come back to Greene County, is you're just going to toggle the frequency between Unicom as well as ATIS by pushing that button right there. And you initially turn the radio on with this little knob right here. That's also your volume control for that knob. For the intercom volume, it's up here, so this is what you'll control the volume in your headset, just like for communications to and from, but also affects, I believe, the radio as well. If you have static issues, what you'll want to do is you'll want to adjust the squelch with this outer knob here for both the pilot and the co-pilot. For the transponder, it defaults to on once you power it up, but then before takeoff you need to push the ALT button, and that way your altitude encoding is going out to air traffic control. As you move over here, this is your mixture control. This will be necessary for starting, for shutdown, and if there's an emergency such as with a fire, you'll be told to pull this aft in the case of an emergency like that. Emergency fuel pump, we'll use that for starting, for takeoff, for landing, and if we have engine failure, you're going to have to get that on. When you start the aircraft, this is your starter button. You just push, hold until the engine starts, and you release. Prop control, I just mentioned earlier, is right there. Throttle, there's throttle in the back as well, so that's it's a shared capability. The rest of this is not in the rear cockpit, so just be aware the pilot in the back is going to be heavily reliant upon you to actuate these. Alternate air switch here, but that's also in the rear cockpit in case that is needed in case of some type of engine anomaly. Down here is the fuel shutoff valve. That should only be needed if there's going to be an off-field landing, and in which case, if you have to use it, you're going to pull it up, and it'll be like so. If you see it like that before engine start, let the pilot know, because the engine's not going to have enough gas to start or keep running. While I'm in this area, for cockpit air, it may be hard to see from the video here, but there's a knob that says push on. That's how you get nice cool air coming into the cockpit. Maybe you can see it over here as well. Moving on back over in this area, here's the throttle. I'm sorry, throttle's here. This is your trim tab. There's no trim control in the rear cockpit, so the pilot's going to ask you, the instructor's going to ask you to move this. You're typically only going to move it about, an inch or so, fore or aft. Don't do anything radical forward and back like that. Just slight movements with it. For the radio, in case you need to talk on the radio, the push talk switch is right here on the control stick. Fuel, it's important that you help the pilot keep an eye and keep track of fuel, and it's because he cannot see it from the rear cockpit. So if you look there, you'll see the fuel gauge. It's just a manual fuel gauge. We typically start off with 3/8 fuel. We come back often with a quarter or slightly less, and there's a indicator on both sides because there's tanks on for both wings. I mentioned earlier I'll have a separate video on emergency egress from the aircraft, but if for some reason the right door won't come off, as it says right here, this is your alternate emergency exit. It will be very difficult to get out, but worst case, if you have to, that's what you'll do, and you'll just push it past the stop, and it should separate, and you can climb out the window if you can. It's going to be pretty challenging again to do that. So. One other important thing to cover with respect to cockpit orientation is, as you strap in the front seat, it is easy for the lap belt to interfere and get wrapped around the rudder pedal. And so therefore this could be a huge problem, either solo or dual, because if you're doing spins or whatever, you're going to have the rudder, and this could interfere with that. So really make sure, pay close attention to make sure that the lap belt, when it's snugged up, and is that it's clear of the rudder pedal on both sides. And you'll want to check it, of course, on the ground, but even in the air, before you start in the aerobatics, you need to make sure that the lap belt is clear from the rudder pedal, because it's right there with it. Normal startup operations and run up for the Decathlon. So passenger briefing complete, door latched and shut. The latches are set. Test the brakes. Electronics are all off. Alternate air here is cold. Throttle open up a 1/2 inch. The prop is full forward. Mixture is idle cutoff. I'm going to turn on the master. As a technique, I go ahead and get the mags at the same time. We'll have the strobes on, nav light on as well. Often need to prime the aircraft. The way we're going to do that is going to go ahead and push the mixture in. Going to move the emergency fuel pump switch up for about a 1/2 second. There, pull the mixture back out. And after that, we'll proceed with the start. We clear the propeller, clear the prop area, control sticks full aft, mags both on already. So as I start, what's going to happen is I'm going to push the starter button here, and as the RPMs pick up, well, rather quickly, obviously, and then as you hear the engine start to hit, then you're going to start feeding in the mixture control slowly. And once you're confident that the engine is started, you need to get your fingers off the starter button immediately, because otherwise the starter will stay engaged and it can burn up the starter. So we're going to go ahead and crank the engine up here. So here we go. So clear prop. There we go. Now we check to make sure that we've got RPMs at 1,000, got oil pressure, oil temperature, here's oil temperature, that'll come up. And at that, we're going to slip on avionics. Radio. Transponder. Toggle between ATIS and Unicom. After that, we'll taxi to the runway, and within the runway, we'll do our run-up. We'll go through the checklist here. Flight control is checked. Elevator trim is here. Once again, we'll check the fuel shutoff valve. I didn't show the video for that before start, though. You want to make sure the fuel shutoff valve is closed, as you see it right there. Go ahead and run the engine up to 1,800 RPMs. What we're looking to do here is to see the drop of the mags. see fuel pump is on for takeoff. Make sure the prop's full forward, mixture's full forward. And there's the checklist. So the last thing we do is get the landing light on to increase our visibility in the flight. For shutdown, after landing you'll get the fuel pump off as we land with it. For shutdown, you'll just turn off the avionics. Pull the mixture, metal cut off. All right, during the flight, if you hear the instructor yell, "Bail out, bail out, bail out," or it otherwise becomes obvious you need to get out of the aircraft, the first thing you're going to have to do is go down and get rid of the door by pulling this ring out. You're going to rotate this handle to a little bit more than 270 degrees. The door may or may not go at that point. There's a good chance it won't because of this latch and this latch. Additionally, there's a handle down here that you got in with that you may have to move. You can move it up or down. At that point, the door will separate. Off it goes. The next thing you need to do, you need to get rid of your headset. Now disconnect the lap belts. Latch goes in one direction, the other goes in the other direction. Clear the belts. At that point, you're going to roll outside the aircraft. Tuck your arms in and roll out the aircraft.